Welcome to the talk show. The title of the talk show is Understanding Quad and AUKUS and the Security Pact in the Indo-Pacific with two prominent experts. First one is
Thank you.
General Arun Sahni, former army commander of the Indian Army of India and strategic analyst.
Thank you.
And another expert is the Beck Strating, the associate professor at Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you very much for joining this talk
Thank
show.
you very much.
Thank you for having me.
So now I need to talk about Quad and AUKUS with the prominent experts. So first question is, this is the side event of the Bay of Bengal conversation in Dhaka. So for Bangladesh people, how important Quad and AUKUS? First question is what?
Okay.
To you.
Thank you, Dr. Satoru. It's a very relevant question that all these upheavals and new groupings that are coming up in the area of the Indo-Pacific, of which the Bay of Bengal is actually the gateway for Bangladesh and for South Asia as well. It is extremely important to understand the criticality and the advantages of Quad. Firstly, the Quad was set up after the tsunami in 2004. This was to have collaborative effort for dealing with climate issues and climate emergencies. However, it then saw again another impetus when the COVID-19 happened, and that's the time it was brought in to look at management and resilience in different areas, be it health, be it in the area of supply chain management, be it in the health of climate and disaster management, and also to ensure that there is a better understanding between the four key pillars that dominate the space of Indo-Pacific. The advantage of India being a member of the Quad is that it will be party to these new agreements and these new initiatives that are already in the process of being finalized or in the matter of discussion. And once that advantage happens to India, with the current policy of India of neighborhood first, the advantages that India would get would pass on to Bangladesh as well. So the advantage of Bangladesh would accrue in an indirect manner through India, and India being a part and it being a key element of the South Asia and a very, very close friend of India. So I think that is where the advantage of Quad would emanate to the people of Bangladesh.
Thank you very much. So I know Professor Beck is a famous maritime security expert. So I want to ask a question about the AUKUS. For Bangladesh people, why AUKUS is important?
It's such an interesting question. So thank you for asking it. And just before we get into this, I think I might do a little bit of explaining how I understand AUKUS, because this, of course, is a trilateral agreement between Australia, the United States and the United Kingdom. And officials of these countries have been really trying to make sure that people understand that it is a technology sharing arrangement. So the point of AUKUS is that these three countries will get together to share some of these critical technologies in order to particularly, I think, have a deterrent effect in the region, to try to deter actions that states might take to try to challenge the status quo. So there's two pillars to AUKUS. The first one will enable Australia in particular to develop nuclear-powered submarines. And the second is really focused on cooperating and collaborating on a range of emerging critical technologies around things like missiles and cyber and things I don't understand really that well, like quantum, these sorts of emerging critical
right.
technologies that are going to be really important for how states try to secure themselves in the time to come. So the question about Bangladesh, so obviously this is a very important agreement for Australia. Why would it matter for Bangladesh is a really interesting question. But one of the things that we don't often think about in terms of Australia's relationship with the Indian Ocean region is that Australia has the longest coastline of any Indian
Absolutely.
Ocean state. And we don't often think so much of Australia as being an Indian Ocean state. Australia tends to look more to the north, up to Asia, or to the particularly to its east, to the Pacific Island states. But what we're seeing now is a bit of a shift in Australia's sense of direction. And the Indian Ocean is going to become more important. It's not just about big strategic competition like China, although Australia is concerned about China's sort of rising presence in that maritime region, but it's also about the range of sort of non-traditional security challenges that states are facing in that region, of which these sorts of emerging critical technologies could actually assist with. Things like dealing with IUU fishing, or helping states in the region to be more aware of their maritime domains, which is a really critical part of maritime security governance and can contribute to states being able to advance some of their blue economy goals. And so as part of this, Australia has been advancing relations with states such as Bangladesh and the Maldives and Sri Lanka in the Bay of Bengal region, as well as increasing its kind of relationship, particularly in the areas of defence and Quad with India.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So the next question is the General Sahni.
Please.
What is India's interest in the Quad? Is this related with the Bay of Bengal? That is the question.
Absolutely. I think it's a very relevant question. If you ever look at the map of the Indian Ocean, I think one of the largest landmass, we have about 8,000 kilometers of coastline which juts into the Indian Ocean. And one portion of that rests on the Bay of Bengal. So today, when you look at the sea lines of communication in the Indian Ocean, which link you to the Pacific Ocean or through the South China Sea, through the Taiwan Strait to East China Sea, you find that one of the most critical and the busiest routes of supply chain is through the 9-degree channel, the Malacca Strait. Over 60% of energy trade, not only of India, but of the Eastern Asia, China, and countries which are in the rim countries of the Pacific, it passes through this area. So the minute you look at this area, India's interest becomes paramount because you literally dominate the 9-degree channel. And this has an advantage. It also has a disadvantage because there are responsibilities that come with it. But the advantage that comes with it is that when you're functioning in the area of, in your near abroad, if there are things which happen which disturb the peace and tranquility, and as something what Beck talked about, the future lies in blue ocean economy. That's where the new frontiers are. That is where the world is looking at. We need to stop climate change impact. We need to stop the problems of acidification and pollution in the oceans. And we need to be able to do within our own respective EEZ, exploit the resources that exist for that. For that, you need peace and tranquility. So if there is peace and tranquility, India's interest would be served because we'll be able to look after our own national interest and be able to operate. And I would say it straight away makes a difference to Bangladesh. The minute India, who happens by size to be a bit larger, would take care of this environment, there is a benefit for all the island territories, all the rim countries to enjoy that benefit. So I think that is where I would say India's national interest lies. The other aspect today, which you're absolutely right, it's a world of collaborative security. I can't do everything alone. So I need friends to do it. And one of the greatest things of Quad, and something what she talked about AUKUS, the technology, emerging technology, availability for a larger people, you have to have a proper, safe and secure supply lines. And this is where the Quad will come into play. So if I have secure supply lines, I'm not dependent on one country. As you're aware, we do have a problem with China along our borders because of the territory. And whatever you might say, China has been the factory of the world for the last so many years. We are all dependent on it. So if we have resilience in our system, India's security aspects will get enhanced automatically, and that of the neighborhood and our friends with whom we are in collaboration to ensure that it's a safe and free passage through these very, very critical areas. So I think that is where you would find is the interest, and national interests of ours as a liberal democracy also merge with those of what the rest of the world wants. I don't want any hegemons. I don't want to fall prey. I don't want my neighborhood to fall prey like what happened to Sri Lanka. It has fallen into a debt trap. So there is economic advantages of engaging with China, but if we can provide them an alternative which is there, which is safer, which will give them the necessary impetus, and there Japan has a critical role to play. Developmental initiatives in Bangladesh, infrastructure set up here, at terms and conditions that you do not fall into a debt trap. You build, you operate, you earn, and you leave it for the state that you're helping out. So that's a very great policy. Instead of putting the other person in debt and forcing him then to become literally a vassal state to you because you're captive because of the kind of debt that you own. So I think when I look at that whole area, I would say it's a very complex situation, but it has advantages that people who talk the same language, who have the same values, have the same ethics, if they collaborate, their strength will become much more. It's like a hand. Each finger is weak, but a fist is strong. So you have friends with you who make that fist, then you are strong in all aspects, not only militarily, but in your capacity to address the socio-economic challenges which are part of the developed world. As you don't have it as much, and neither does Australia, but we have tremendous socio-economic challenges. Those get addressed. We give correct value for these areas, allocate resources for this instead of wasting on military development. So I would leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Beck, the similar question, but about AUKUS. What is the national interest of Australia in AUKUS, and is this related with Bay of Bengal?
Well, certainly Australia has a strong national interest in AUKUS, given it was really Australia's idea. So there is a clear link between how Australia views its regional interests in particular and this agreement that emerged. But I just want to go back to a point, this idea that India doesn't want a regional hegemon. Well, Australia probably does, but it wants it to be the United States. Okay. And that's part of the issue, is that's no longer the case. You know, the US is no longer a regional, you know, the regional order in Asia and the Pacific is no longer built on US primacy. And that's really what a state like Australia, which is such a close ally with the United States, is grappling with. That shift in order. And AUKUS, I think, really emerges from these bigger shifting structural power dynamics that Australia is grappling with. So, you know, yes, it's about nuclear-powered submarines. I mean, that is really at the heart of this. We talk about, you know, Pillar 2 and emerging technologies, and I think there's a lot of potential there. But a lot of the focus has been on developing what's going to be what's called SSN AUKUS, nuclear-powered submarines. And this is, you know, really part of what was driving Australia. There was a French, there was an agreement with the French. There was a French submarine program that would have developed conventionally powered submarines, which was in a lot of trouble. So Australia wanted to scrap that program, move to nuclear-powered submarines, recognising that the technological environment had shifted, which made the sense of nuclear-powered being preferred to conventionally powered submarines. So there's the kind of, I guess, the defence interest there. But really, this is about integrated deterrence. Like, this is about Australia buying into that idea that the US has put forward in a lot of its Indo-Pacific declaratory policy. And it does go back to what you were saying about the collective security environment. And that's how the US terms it, integrated deterrence. And Australia is probably the most enthusiastic proponent of that concept. This idea of that it needs to step up to the plate in kind of burden sharing and to do more in defence. And Australia wants to play a bigger regional role. It doesn't really see itself as a middle power anymore. It wants a seat at the table. It wants to be with India and Japan and the United States in the Quad. It wants to be a big regional player. And so this is not just about nuclear-powered submarines. For Australia, this is about order preservation. It is about maintaining as much of that US-led order, as much of that rules-based order, as Australians like to say, as possible, as a response to these very, shifting dynamics and uncertainties that are emerging in the region.
Thank you. Now, the question is related with the Taiwan crisis. This is a recently hot topic. So, what is Quad's role in the Taiwan crisis, and what is AUKUS' role in the Taiwan crisis? I want to ask. So, General, please.
Extremely interesting question. Hypothetical, but I think maybe relevant for discussion undoubtedly. First thing I want to put in order that Quad is not really a military alliance. As India has been saying, our Prime Minister has said it, it's been resonated in the summits by all the four Prime Ministers and the President Biden himself. It's a partnership of equals who are looking at rule-based order and ensuring a free and open navigation through the seas. I think that's where the pillar is. And as I said, the historical significance of Quad was linked to ensuring that the non-traditional threats that agree in that area, we can all collaboratively ensure that human security is given the due importance. And that doesn't mean that it's only for the members, but for all those who live in this whole environment of the Indo-Pacific, it actually accrues to them. Now, if there is a war on, or if there is a conflict in Taiwan and China hypothetically decides to invade Taiwan, well, I think two things have to be understood. Unlike East Asia, where there are treaties of US's partnership in the security of Japan and Taiwan, there is no such commitment for any of the Asian states. So we haven't. That's a fallout of the Second World War and out of, I would say, a fallout of what transited in the period prior to the setting in of the Cold War. So here, at no stage would India ever look at the fact that if we have a border clash with Ladakh, I'd get the Americans and the Japanese and the Australians coming to fight. I'm sorry, no, we're not looking at that. Where you can come in, and this is where technology, the global commons, the cyberspace, the intelligence, the ISR, all this is areas where you can collaborate and secure. What happens is if there are pressure points that have to be created, anything that goes through into the South China Sea has to, if it is from the Indian Ocean, including about 60% of the energy resources that would have to go to China, has to transit through this path. You have means in naval parlance of being able to dominate these areas and have checks and balances which will impede the capacity for China to wage war in a long-term perspective. So I would look at it, it will be indirect. It doesn't mean that tomorrow China goes to Taiwan, unlike what US has a commitment to be physically supporting them, or like it has with Japan, which is now being relooked at, I'm told, or at least there are issues. We don't have any such thing. And as we said, it's not a military alliance, but yes, if friends are in problem and there is an independent state being looked at, we would like to take on the responsibility that comes as a responsible regional player, as a middle power, in ensuring that the correct values and ethics are followed in dealing in interstate relations. So I think you would see an indirect kind of an availability where you would support these kind of initiatives if there is pressure points to be created, and that would be the role that we would come in. We would look at where the resilience of the supply chains that get affected, we would become instrumental, and that's what we are looking at, developing ports in the Andaman and Nicobar, who can take on the role tomorrow. If you have to go through the Lombok or you have to go down through the Sunda Strait, you need places where people would require assistance to be able to do these 72 hours, 96 hours, 108 hours of kind of traffic before they get in from the southern portion, whether they go to Australia or they come up over the first island chain and get back to Japan and East Asia. So we would create those infrastructures which would be available for our friends to use. So I think I would see that kind of a role for India really, if it had to come, I mean, if as they say, if things had to really go so far down the line, it would be an indirect support for that. And like I would say, if today we have a problem at the borders of Ladakh, the only thing that we could expect that the Five Eyes, which we are also now not really a signatory, but are an indirect member of, inputs available from them will give us some real-time intelligence, which will ensure that we are better prepared for whatever has to happen. So I think that is the way I would see the role of India if Quad went in. Australia would have its own standing on how it wants to do it. And I think Japan and the US, I would again say Japan would have its own way of being able to bring pressure points from your area. I mean, I can only conjecture. I mean, Japan would be the best to answer, which you would be the right man. But I would say US's collaborative role would be that we could provide it indirect support in areas which would facilitate the action that is happening there and to try and redress this anomaly that has happened. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This is the last question, the same question, but what is the role of AUKUS in Taiwan crisis?
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting question. I mean, there's been a lot of, I guess, justifications for nuclear-powered submarines in Australia. So why does it need nuclear-powered submarines? Why does it need submarines that can travel for long distances without having to come up to snort? And that is because there is an expectation that Australia will be doing more in the seas of Northeast Asia. And Taiwan is certainly one area where nuclear-powered submarines could potentially play a role. And one of the justifications is this idea, not just that, you know, it might play a role in conflict, but in deterring conflict, because submarines can create uncertainty in the minds of adversaries. So yes, there could be a role for nuclear-powered submarines, and potentially a role for some of the technology that might be developed. That is still all of this is quite new still. But I think the bigger question is, when are those submarines going to arrive, if at all? Because there is, you know, a long history in Australia of defence procurement. I mean, this is based on a defence procurement that went bad, like an arrangement with the French. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm lacking optimism, but a realistic picture would suggest that actually getting those SSN AUKUS submarines by 2040s, it might be too late for them contributing in a contingency in Taiwan. The time horizons on this are a little bit sort of uncertain. But the SSN AUKUS is only one part of the submarine picture, because there's also a plan for Australia to get 3, potentially 5 second-hand Virginia-class submarines from the United States, and that would come in the 2030s, in which case I cannot conceive of a situation where the United States wouldn't expect that those submarines would be used in a Taiwan contingency. They would be expecting, if the US is there, Australia is there. Otherwise, Australia is not getting those Virginia-class submarines.
I think quite pragmatically correct. I think you're right. The expectations would be there.
Thanks to the two prominent experts, this was a very valuable conversation, I believe. So, moderator my name is Satoru Nagao, the Hudson Institute. Thank you very much for watching. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Namaskar.
Thank you.